as we go. And as you've just heard, the meeting is being recorded on request from a number of people. So I'd like to first say my name is Pip Hinman, and before we start, I'd like to pay my respects to the Gadigal Wangal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land I'm meeting. I'm on. Obviously, people are in different parts of New South Wales, but in so paying my respects, and I am also committing to work for justice, continue to work for justice for First Nations peoples. Thank you everyone for joining in. This is an important community meeting. Residents for Deamalgamation, as probably you know, formed last year first to campaign for council to agree to opt for the option to allow residents a direct say on the demerger of the Inner West back to the three councils, Marrickville, Ashfield and Leichhardt. And then we went on, when that was won, to prosecute the case for it. That was overwhelmingly vindicated by the 62.5% vote to demerge at the council poll. It's been 4 months since then, and residents are itching to know what's going on. So we called this meeting to hear from councillors and the Inner West Council staff about where the process is at. Now, we're very pleased to be joined by Associate Professor of Public Policy and Local Government, Joseph Drew. Joseph, I might add, is joining us in a private capacity. So I'd just like to sketch out quickly how we'd like to run the meeting. So we're going to hear from Joseph first. After that, we'll hear from Inner West Greens Councillor Justine Langford, then the General Manager of Inner West Council, Peter Gainsford, then Independent Councillor John Stamolis, then Brian Halstead from Save Our Councils, and then Rochelle Porteous, who was a former councillor both in the Inner West and a former Mayor of Leichhardt and the Inner West Council. Now, not all these panellists will be speaking for the same time, so we do want time. We're very, we want to have time for questions and answers. So some people have sent their questions in. We're going to look at some of those, but you can type yours into the chat box and we'll endeavour to get through as many of them as we possibly can. Obviously, this is an online meeting. It's not the same as an in-person, but I'd like to be able to have a good discussion. So it means that I'll be asking the speakers to stick to their times. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Joseph, who's going to kick us off with some of the context. Go for it.
Can we all hear me for starters? Yep, and I can share screens, hopefully. No, it says you've disabled screen sharing. You've got to allow me to do it, Pip. We're all still getting used to Zoom, aren't we? After 2.5 years, I'm no better.
Does that help?
Yeah, I can get it now. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing a PowerPoint presentation in front of you. Is that correct? What got changed around, I was an expert witness in a Supreme Court case and they wouldn't have me in the room because I wasn't vaccinated at the time. And they had to do it via Zoom and they got in there and changed things and it's never been the same ever since, and I'm not very technological, so you'll just have to cope with my clumsiness. Okay, so I'm a professor here in Australian University and adjunct professor in 4 universities abroad, but I'm here today as a private citizen. I need to emphasise that. So I'm often asked the same sort of questions, so I'm just here to answer the questions for you. So first question I hear straight away, is it possible to de-amalgamate? Yes, it is. We've done it 5 times in Australia. We are the de-amalgamation champions of the world because we are the champions of stuffed up amalgamations. It's quite embarrassing when I go overseas. So we do amalgamations really badly. I'm not anti-amalgamation. You can do good amalgamations and I've written about it. But you can do them really badly too, and we did these ones incredibly badly. I was saying prior to them that they would end up in disaster, and sadly, all my scholarly research with my Japanese colleagues has confirmed they have been disastrous in a fiscal sense. So the one I like to talk about a lot is a very old one. It's from Delatite in Victoria. In the Bracks government, it was one of the Kennedy government amalgamations. It was quite unpopular at the time. And Bracks was in, and the Mansfield community wanted to split away from Delatite. And the reason why Victoria is interesting is, unlike us, they do a citizen satisfaction survey every single year. And it's been consistent questions. So we can see what people thought about the de-amalgamation. Now, you possibly can't see the numbers because my screen's not big enough, and I apologize for that. I'll try to blow it up a bit. In 2001, prior to the de-amalgamation, they had a satisfaction rating of 55. The average for the state was 65. The average for other small rural councils was 63. It's always a little bit lower in rural areas because we get the short end of the stick. We've got chips on our shoulder about it. I live in the rural areas. You can see from my Zoom shot, that's the back of my farm. In 2002, what happened is Bracks had to go to a by-election and he had a minority government. And the group that wanted the de-amalgamation backed Bracks' candidate on the understanding that if she got up, they would get their de-amalgamation. She got up, and a few weeks later, they got their de-amalgamation. 2002, they're getting a glimpse that the de-amalgamation is going to happen. Went up to 58. The average for the states and the country councils more or less stay the same. Then it gets de-amalgamated, and this is where it gets really interesting. But now I sort of they were very ambivalent about de-amalgamation. They didn't really care. They weren't engaged in the process. It was Mansfield that was really go-getters that really wanted to break away. Mansfield, not surprisingly, their satisfaction went up through the roof, 66, way above the state average. Remember, they were 58, 55 previously. So they've really flown up. They're very happy they got what they want. But Benalla, that didn't really care, and that got shorted. Not through ill will. It's just if you don't do this properly, if you don't know what you're doing, one community can easily get done in the process. They were happier, 62. Go another year out. Mansfield's even more ecstatic, 71. We're going stratospheric. Benalla, 64. They're getting happier. We can go another year out, 3 years after de-amalgamation, but at this point, you could say, oh, why are you stopping? But at this point, local political influences are going to start playing a part, aren't they? We've got to draw the line at somewhere. So it settles a bit down. I think reality starting to dawn, but 60 and 65 versus the original 55, both communities were happier. Even though Benalla didn't really want to do it, it was the Mansfield that were the gung-ho people. We know this is probably the only evidence internationally, that's why I published it, that it can work and people can be happier at the end of the process, even when that process wasn't particularly well done. The next question I get asked all the time was, how much does it cost? This time I'm going to look at the Queensland de-amalgamations because they were more recent. They were in 2014. This is Queensland Order Office starting. You definitely won't be able to read these numbers. They're too small. My apologies. I'll read them out to you. Douglas Shire. Now, what's interesting here is there's estimates about the de-amalgamation cost, and then we've got the QAO data about what it actually did cost. And you'll find that the estimates or guesstimates are wildly inaccurate. That's number one finding. Number two finding is it's hard to get these figures precisely because we keep doing amalgamations and de-amalgamations midway through a financial year, which makes it really hard for people to extract the data, including the councils themselves. So the estimate of the cost for Douglas Shire was 4.5 million, roughly. It actually cost 3.2 million. Estimate for Livingstone, 7.7 million, actually cost just under 7. The estimate for Mareeba, 6 million, actually cost 4.8 something. The estimate for Sunshine Coast, 11 million, actually cost 4.4 million. Now, Sunshine Coast is really interesting. I want to focus on it. I did a scholarly paper on it. Sunshine Coast didn't want Noosa to break away in a big way. Noosa had a rubbish tip and Sunshine Coast didn't, or some such thing. I can't quite remember the story, but there's something that Noosa had that they really didn't want to lose. And the way the legislation was written was really poor. They basically gave all the power to the remnant council and told them they could decide what assets Noosa would get and what staff Noosa would get. And one of their first costs was a whole heap of redundancies, because guess what Sunshine Coast gave them? All the staff that they couldn't use or didn't need or weren't suitable. When communities don't want a de-amalgamation to happen, or when councils don't want a de-amalgamation to happen, the estimates tend to be much higher. So that $11 million estimate, the real cost was 4 million. That's because they didn't want it to work. And if they don't want it to work, the cost can actually be higher. Now, both sides in that debate actually got commercial consultants involved. From memory, Noosa had someone say it only cost 1.2 million. They were obviously wrong because it cost 4.4. Sunshine Coast got someone involved that said it cost 20-something million. You can see that depending on whether you want it or not, will colour the costing you get from a commercial consultant. Let's be honest about it. People that watch my YouTube channel know I don't like commercial consultants because it's quite clear you pay to get a story and you get the story you were expecting. It's as simple as that. Now, I'm not saying they're deliberately doing it, but it's a commercial arrangement. Anyone that's ever got work from me knows that I say what I think, and the first thing I ever do is sit you down for a 5-minute rant about if you cross me, I walk away and you don't get the work done. If you disagree with me and you can give me good reasons, I'll consider it. You're right, I'll go along with you. If you're wrong, I'll tell you you're wrong. If you push it and insist that I write something that I don't agree with, I just walk away because I can. I'm a professor. My job's to teach people and to write papers and books, not to do consulting. A commercial consultant can't do that. They don't have that power. So it puts them in a bad position. Okay, while I'm on this topic, if you want to know anything about how well the deamalgamations worked in Queensland, I did a paper on that looking at 20 years worth of data or something. Several papers on New South Wales looking at what actually happened in a fiscal sense. Go and jump onto the YouTube site. I've got little 10-minute videos. I'll go through it, telling you the main finding. The main thing you need to know is Queensland started off well and ended up really quite ordinarily bad. New South Wales started off bad from the get-go in a financial sense, and it's getting worse. So I've got a paper under review at present now showing it's no longer, it started off being 10% extra unit cost. So you got more inefficient, it cost you more, which is a complete opposite of what we were going for. Then it went up to 11% for the next paper. The last paper I submitted 13.5%. It's getting worse, which is what happened in Queensland, is what we expect. I just didn't expect it to start so bad. So that's why some communities aren't happy. Now, how do you actually get a deamalgamation happen? There's been 3 big cases, our Victorian case, our Queensland case, and the Canadian case. And they all happen through something called heuristics. It's a neologism, a word that was invented by the great William H. Riker. This is a great book, by the way, very small, easy to read, go and get a copy. It's basically the games politicians play. And I don't know if you're as cynical as me, but I understand I vote, but I'm not the person that actually calls the policy. The policy gets decided by lobbyists and politician games and politician bargaining between them. It's got nothing to do with what I want. Well, certainly none of the policies lately have had anything to do with what I personally wanted. Okay, so how did it happen in Victoria? I've already told you, minority government, they desperately needed their candidate to get up. The deamalgamation group, who was very vocal, they often are in country areas, backed the winner. They got the winner, they kept them to the deal, they got their deamalgamation. How did it happen in Queensland? They asked the opposition, when they're in opposition, to promise to allow deamalgamations if they got in. This is LMP. It was under that, I can never remember his name, great big tall bloke. He got turfed out, he could never win. And they put Campbell Newman in. Campbell Newman got up, and they held him to the promise, and they said, who'd like to get deamalgamated? 15 hands went up, and they went, oh no, we cannot have half the state deamalgamated at once. We don't even know how to do one, let alone 15. And they got QTC, who was a bit like our Treasury Corp and IPAR. They had the fingers all over the original amalgamations. They got them to mark their own homework, a bit like the Boundaries Commission's doing with the deamalgamation proposals at the moment. And they whittled that 15 down to 5, and then they went for a referendum, and they got 4 up, and those 4 went ahead. They've all been successes to varying degrees in both a fiscal sense and in terms of what the community thinks. So, and the same thing happened in Canada. The opposition, when they were in opposition, said, will you allow deamalgamation? Of course, they said yes. It's an easy way to get votes. Doesn't actually cost you anything. You're mad not to say it. I'm just surprised every opposition doesn't do it. Particularly in the rural amalgamations, they're mostly national seats, and I'm a conservative myself. No, don't hold it against me if you're not. There's got to be something pretty big to make us vote the other way, and they will. You saw what happened in Orange and New South Wales. So of course the opposition said, yeah, we'll allow deamalgamations. Your trick is A, to back the right horse and hope they get in, because that's your best bet, because this current government doesn't seem to want to acknowledge there's a problem, even though we've got amalgamated councils in financial administration. We've got other ones such as Cootamundra Gundagai had to put up their rates 58.5% to keep their heads above water. And we've got several others about to go under. They just won't acknowledge the problem. I think, and I'm not a Labor voter, I think probably your best chance is if there is a change of government, it's quite a high likelihood of it anyway because of other issues. Back the right horse, that seems to be the way you get these things. That's what's happened in the past. What's notable is no one's actually got it through going through the Boundaries Commission process. The Boundaries Commission is currently composed of 3 of the 4 people who were the original Boundaries Commission. I was involved with a council that went through the Boundaries Commission process. I did the work for them, thorough, sophisticated work, showed that they'd be paid back in 7 years. The Boundaries Commission went to a commercial consultant who'd already had been made a mockery of in the scholarly literature for bombing up local government work. In fact, I'd made them look like fools in the best journal in Australia. Got them to do the work and asked them to assess the business case over 5 years when they had in their hot little hand my work that said there was a 7-year payback period. Remember, Fit for the Future, how many years we had payback period? 20 years to make it look good. I did 10 because that makes sense, because long-term financial plans that local governments use are over 10 years. I produced a report saying it will work over 7 years, they'll get their money back. So we go to a commercial consultant and ask them to do a report over 5 years. And strangely enough, there was no payback over 5 years. The standard of the work was absolutely appalling too, which leads me to the next point. Don't make the same mistakes we made with the amalgamation. There was 2 big mistakes we made. We went to commercial consulting firms. So I and Professor Brian Dollery were doing papers. We had 8 published at the time saying this was going to be an absolute disaster. Don't do it. Do these things instead. They ignored us. They paid $400,000 to KPMG for their spreadsheet that no one ever gets to see, even when judges order them to produce it. I was an expert witness in a case. They paid monies to Ernst & Young, iPart, T Corp. Everyone got a whole heap of money, millions of dollars we're talking to, guys. And they forgot to get people that were actually independent and had expertise in these fields. So the econometrics and data and development analysis I do, I'm one of the world leaders. That's why I work for 4 universities abroad. Commercial consulting firms just can't do that stuff. And they can't afford to be obnoxious like me and tell the truth, whether people want to hear it or not. So go to a proper expert. Commercial consultants are always going to be struggling to have anywhere near the skills to do it. They're always going to be in a bind because at the end of the day, they've got to make the money. It's not that easy for them. They've got to think about the next job. The second thing to remember is don't make the mistake of being focused just on getting your deamalgamation. That was one of the big problems with the amalgamation. It was all about amalgamation day. No one thought about what happened the next day. There was a little instruction booklet put together, but there was no instructions to administrators about what they had to do to secure those savings and how to do a reorganisation, set up an appropriate structure and have a discussion about service levels and rates harmonisations and all those things that should have happened very early in the piece when there was an administrator there, didn't have to worry about being voted in, although a lot of them did run for election and become mayor. They oughtn't to have. A bit of a conflict there. Those things, if they'd been done early on, these amalgamations would have been much more successful than what they were. We got all the costs, we got none of the savings because no one was forced into making these savings. You know what these efficiencies are? There's people's lives and people's jobs. To realize your efficiency, you've got to make someone redundant. That's what the efficiency is. It's Bob or Sue that had a job in the council and thought they'd have a job next week. And that's really hard to do. On paper, it looks really easy. We'll assume we'll have staff savings of 4% and we multiply everything through by 0.96 and whoop-de-doo that. But someone's actually got to do the firing, and that's a really hard job. Now, unless you're prepared to do that, and the best positioned person is the administrator because he doesn't have to turn up and face the voters, you only get the costs and you don't get the savings. And that's precisely what happened. Now, there was one point I missed before. When I was talking about the cost of these things, 7 million, 5 million, I'm saying it really glibly, and some of you are going, gee, that's an awful lot of money. Well, you're right, it is. But you know what your revenue was last year? 274 million. So say worst case scenario, 7 million. That's about 2.5%, 3% of your budget. It's no biggie for a big council like you. It's a bit different for a small council, but it really isn't a big deal for a big council. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but it's the equivalent of loose change. And if the de-amalgamation is done properly, if you're focused on the morning after, dividing up the assets properly, following a proper plan like the plan I laid out for the council I worked for, getting the legislation right, you will save more money than that anyway within 5, 6, 7 years. And the rules are changed about who pays anyway. So that's about it. My position is I'm Switzerland. I want democracy to prevail. I always wanted these things to go to referendum. I'm a natural law philosopher as well as an accountant and economist. I believe that people should give you good reasons for doing things. And I believe that most people are reasonable. If they give you good reasons, you'll go along with them. I don't think you were given good reasons for the amalgamation, which is why there's lots of groups like yours. So whatever you want, basically. I go after this, so if there's any super quick questions, I can try to answer them. Otherwise, I can just go. I live in the country, so we wake up at 5 o'clock, which means we go to bed very early as well.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think there's a question in the chat, but I think we'll just continue on because I think it's more related to the particular Inner West Council here. And while it would be interesting to go on to floods and stormwater infrastructure, Tom, I think we'll just continue on. Our next speaker.
Thank you. I'll depart. See you.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. That's terrific. We've got your slides now too, so they're part of the recording, and some people have asked for that. Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Councillor Justine Langford. She's a Greens councillor and she was elected at the end of last year. And before she speaks, I'd just like to acknowledge that both Kobe Chetty from the Greens and Pauline Lockie, an independent councillor, have joined us. Thank you very much, councillors, for coming into here residents. So over to you, Justine.
Thank you, Pip. Yeah, Justine Langford, and I'm coming to you from the land of the Gadigal Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and the land was never ceded. I also want to pay my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are on the call tonight. I want to acknowledge my fellow speakers, and that includes Associate Professor Joseph Drew and former and present councillors, and also Brian Halstead from Save Our Councils, who'll be speaking later on. And I also want to say a big thank you to Pip and the residents for Demerger, for Deamalgamation, just for organising the meeting tonight and for inviting me to speak. It's a really important conversation and we need to keep it going and keep the momentum. I would have really liked it if Inner West Council could have been running the meeting tonight and leading on this matter, because obviously we really need to respect what residents voted for. And luckily we have this group here, so we can talk together this evening. I was elected in December 2021, and since then I've put up 2 notices of motion requests at council meetings requesting transparency and community involvement around the demerger business case. I'm sorry to tell you that unfortunately both of the motions that I put forward were defeated. So in each time the Greens and independent councillors voted in favour, and all of the Labor councillors voted against those motions. That was really disappointing and surprising, and I really don't understand why Labor didn't support those motions. The first motion I put up was in February, and that one called out to set a timeline to deliver the demerger business case to local government minister by the 30th of November. It also it was about making a commitment to working with the community and to keeping the community informed and also to guarantee no forced redundancies at council were the demerger to go ahead, so to provide reassurance to staff. So that motion was defeated. The next motion I put up was in March, and that one was calling again for a timeline to be developed for the preparation of the business case, also for councillors to receive monthly progress reports on the demerger case, and for regular updates to be published in the Inner West News for the community to keep them informed. Again, that motion was defeated. So it seems at the moment that the case for the demerger is secret business that unfortunately myself and other councillors have absolutely no visibility on. Even though I'm your elected representative, I have no information to share with you at all about the business case, even though 63.5% of you voted for it. And that's a really awkward position for me to be in, and I don't feel comfortable about it, and I'm quite concerned about it, frankly. So the only information that I've had about the business case was very recently a short briefing note sent by the General Manager, who's speaking with us tonight, Peter Gainsford, saying that the external consultants, Morrison Lowe, are going to run the business case. That's all I know. I don't know the process that Morrison Lowe were appointed. I don't know what brief they were given. I don't know what the timeline is for the business case. I don't know the cost of having Morrison Lowe prepare the business case. And I really believe that all of this should have come before council, because this is about democracy. I think as council, we should really be doing much better than this. And as a Green, I believe in grassroots democracy, and I believe in the community voice, and I believe in transparency. Council, I strongly support the demerger. I've lived in the area for around 30 years. I've experienced what it was like as the former Marrickville Council and the transition to the merged council. I think a large mega council really does undermine the idea of local, and it's not good for democracy. So council is really here first and foremost for residents, and we are here to serve the residents. I'm here to represent residents, and council would not exist without the residents. So, and the council really needs to listen to the community. So this is about community first. It's clear from the demerger poll that residents are not happy, and I think that this is not a direct reflection on council staff. I know they work really hard and are very dedicated, and it's not their fault that the council was forcibly merged. And I think that I'll do whatever I can in my term of council to keep the demerger on the agenda. And I hope that the information that we get tonight from Peter Gainsford is going to give us more information. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming along.
Thanks very much, Councillor Justine Langford. Yes, I've also heard that both the General Manager and the Mayor did meet with the Minister of Local Government. So, Peter, you're on next. Maybe you can fill us in on that meeting, and of course you're giving a presentation as well. I hope the shared screen works for you.
Okay, am I on now, Pip? Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for the opportunity to talk tonight. I am just hoping this shared screen works. Can you see that screen now, Pip?
Yes, all good.
Great, excellent. Oops, I'll just it works. There we go. Thank you. Look, thanks for the opportunity to talk. Hopefully, I'll clarify a few of the questions that have arisen throughout the presentations, and we'll run through that today. So my name's Peter Gainsford. I'm the General Manager of the Inner West Council. I'm just going to start with a bit of a background, and sorry if it's a bit of a long sort of potted history, but I think it's important to understand where I've come from and the involvement of Morrison Lowe. I think it contextualised things a little bit. So I took this selfie the other day. You might wonder why I put a selfie. I wonder what I was going to do with it. But that door there is at one of our depots at Balmain, behind Balmain Town Hall. That's where I started at the Leichhardt Council. Now, the Inner West Council in 1983 as an apprentice carpenter. Still there. It's not used as a carpenter shop anymore. But I started my career at Leichhardt Council. I worked through. It was a different place then. The area indeed was different then. I worked through my apprenticeship. I did engineering at TAFE. Moved into the engineering office, did an engineering degree and also an MBA, which I finished. I progressed through. I've worked as a property manager at
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, can I get you to press your full screen mode so that people can see, because we can't actually see that third slide that you're talking about.
The picture of me or the next one?
You're talking about the first one, but you're talking, yeah, if you go to full screen mode, it'll be easier for everyone to see. That's all.
Okay, I thought it was on full screen mode. I've shared the screen. So what slide have you got on now at the moment, Pip?
You've got the first slide.
Oh, it hasn't moved.
You're not doing a slideshow, Peter.
I think you have to go down the slides, press this number 2.
That's right. How about that? Does that work all right?
No, that's still on the first slide.
And what about
presentation mode? Yeah, that's good. That's the second slide.
Okay, no worries. My apologies. I was sharing it at my end, but I don't know what was happening and at full screen. So just a little bit of history of me. Sorry, you didn't see that photo. I shared that slide. This is where I first started at the council in 83, which I talked about. I've worked my way through and I've worked as a property manager at Leichhardt Council, an asset manager at Leichhardt Council. And I was a director of infrastructure from acting and permanent from 2003. And I was fast forward to 2016 when we were merged. I was the only one from senior staff that ended up on the new executive of the Inner West Council. I was a deputy general manager there. I worked through the merger process. I was there till about beginning of 2018, and I went to a neighbouring council, ironically, that wasn't merged, the City of Canada Bay. I was their general manager for a bit over 3 years and came back to Inner West last year. One of the ironic things that happened when I was first appointed as a director at Leichhardt Council, for those that have been around long enough, we used to look after the Glebe area. So we lost 20% of our area to the City of Sydney at that time. So I've had experience at working through the changes that impacts on the organisation, losing a chunk of your area and giving that to another authority. And along, as the professor mentioned before, you lose staff to management changes, assets. So a bit simpler than a demerger, but nevertheless, the challenges and the level of detail that you need to get in, get that done and get everything to happen appropriately. So that sort of gives me a context. I certainly have a good understanding of large and smaller councils, and particularly our council and what it was like beforehand. Back in 2015, in the lead up to the amalgamation, the Inner West there were 6 councils mooted to join and become a large Inner West council: Ashfield, Burwood, City of Canada Bay, Leichhardt, Marrickville and Strathfield. So Morrison Lowe did some work for all of those councils, was involved in pulling together their long-term financial plans, looking at their ongoing financial sustainability and looking at all the fit for future criteria that was put forward at that time. So they had intimate knowledge of all of those councils and presented and looked at their financial situation going forward and working out how they would be financially sustainable independently, and also showed the model of the merged council. Those submissions were put in by each council into the government as part of that work. So fast forward to last year, we then looked at and spoke to Morrison Lowe when council resolved in May last year to undertake a high-level cost-benefit assessment case, which you're probably all aware of. So of the 3 councils, but I think it's important just to talk about a little bit of how that evolved, that business case. So I just want to touch on a couple of key points out of that were done from last year. So when it was done last year, Morrison Lowe reviewed the 14-15 was the last full financial year for each of the former councils. that we could to get a comparison, because when they merged the next year, it wasn't right on the financial year, so we couldn't use the 15-16. So they looked at the 14-15 long-term financial plans. They re-established the models that they've done from the former councils in 2015, and they're put that modelling through to 19-20. They then validated those models against 3 councils that did merge, Burwood, Canada Bay and Strathfield, and then compared results of Inner West with an aggregated model of Ashfield, Leichhardt and Marrickville. So there's a little bit of a bit of analysis and checking of their models back and forth with the experience that they had and the understanding of the financial impacts of the other councils. We then looked at, as part of that, they then looked at changes in service levels and industry compliance requirements. So the service levels have harmonised to an increased level. The most simplest one that we can say is grass verge mowing in the former Ashfield area is now brought in. So there were changes in service levels. There's been increased industry compliance requirements, particularly fire safety, some new assets coming on board, impacts of COVID-19 with financial impacts, and they were added into the models with a start date of July 2022. On that, there was a part of the work that we did. We also, the council asked us to get feedback from the staff. We did a staff survey. 71% of the staff at the time wanted council, the Inner West Council, to remain as is. And we had a staff consultative committee who expressed concerns about the change, because they talked about a bit of change fatigue, because there'd been a lot of change through the merger process over the past 5 years. So they were a bit concerned about that. So we had all of that feedback into that report that came back to council. And we move on to the poll result. As you were all well aware, the result in favour of a demerger in December. So following that, as Councillor Langford said, there's been a couple of reports to council. We have also written to the Minister for Local Government, which kindly gave us a meeting and a little bit of time at short notice, so we could actually say that we are submitting a business case. Put that to her, tried to get some undertakings, which we've written off, but we haven't heard back yet on terms of paying for the business case. Sorry, not paying for the business case, paying for the demerger cost, trying to get a timeline from the Office of Local Government on that, but we haven't yet to hear back from the Minister. We have got Morrison Lowe doing the work for 2022, the business case. And it's interesting when some of the councillors mentioned that, well, what's the criteria, and people understand what's going on with the business case. There are no business case guidelines for a demerger. So it's really important for us. Well, what framework do we use? Well, the New South Wales Government, the Treasury, have produced business case guidelines. So we are preparing and doing work in accordance with those guidelines. So Morrison Lowe are going to go in and have a look at preparing the business case in accordance with those guidelines. We're going to get the draft business case and report it. We have an audit, risk and improvement committee. It's made up of an independent chair, a couple of councillors, and a couple of other independent bodies on that. We will report the business case to the audit, risk and improvement committee. We're going to then bring it back to a councillor workshop, and before it's reported to a June ordinary meeting, along with a plan for community engagement. That's sort of the time frame. I'll just go into a little bit of the detail associated with the business case. So they're going to build on, Morrison Lowe will build on the financial impact assessment undertaken last year to develop the business case. As I said before, there's no guidelines, and they're going to develop those in accordance with the New South Wales Government guidelines. So the state government use these guidelines for most strategic decisions and significant funding allocations for infrastructure, technology, and any policy or structural change. And that will then give us a format and a business case that we think was suitable for the decision that the Boundary Commission and the Minister will be asked to make on the demerger. So following on to that, in terms of the business case itself, it will have 4 parts. One will be the case for change, which will outline the poll results, but also the final community consultation results that we get after we put the business case out there. We'll have cost benefit analysis, which will be revised from the Morrison Lowe report. Intent to investigate the benefits, seek to undertake an economic analysis, potential estimate the demerger in net present value. So it's important too, in terms of the cost benefit analysis and the cost, we'll also look at the service levels. The last case last year only had one version of the service levels. We'll also look at another version of winding back the service levels to the former council service levels. But there'll be some challenges in that because of increased statutory requirements. So we just need to have a look at the risk associated with using those reduced service levels. There'll be financial commercial analysis in accordance with the New South Wales government guidelines. And then there'll be some managerial analysis, which will look at the organisation's ability to deliver, any risk associated with that, and any issues that may be pertinent to that decision. One last piece of the puzzle we'll have to look is one of the bases that usually is Council's latest long-term financial plan. This is just about to go on exhibition. It's going to be considered by Council next week, and then we'll be going on exhibition. The key number or line to look here, it's a typical profit and loss statement over 10 years. We've got the income at the top, expenses in that section there, getting down to the bottom line, which tells you whether you're in deficit or surplus. So we have a deficit of 744,000 for the first year of the financial plan. As we work our way out of, like all government organisations and organisations out of the impacts of COVID, we work out that we work into a surplus for every year going forward in the long-term financial plan. So Morrison Lowe will also use that long-term financial plan as part of their work going forward for the business case. So in terms of the next steps, as I said before, there'll be a report to our Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. We'll have a councillor briefing. We'll brief our councillors. We'll take it to the 12th of June council meeting. We'll undertake some community engagement, endeavour to bring it back at the 9th of August on the outcome of the community engagement, and then we will submit a business case in August. So that's the timing, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think there are many questions for you, but before we jump into that, I'd like to just, if you don't mind, go into the last couple of speakers, and then we will come back for questions. There have been a few in the chat already.
I've just got to work out how to stop sharing. Oh, there we go. I've got it. There we go. Thank you.
So look, yeah, thank you for all of that. I'm glad to see that there is a timeline. It seems to be sooner than a lot of us were thinking. I guess we're a bit left in the dark here, but I want to move on to Councillor John Stamelos, Independent Councillor John Stamelos, who is next on our panel. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Pip. Good evening, residents, and thank you for attending the meeting tonight. Just a couple of quick comments. We must recognise that the demerger poll is an official government poll conducted under the requirements of the New South Wales Electoral Commission, and it represents your vote and your voice, and Council must respect that. In fact, if you look at the poll and compare that to the council election, that is the election of your councillors, more people voted in the poll than for your councillors, if you look at the informal votes. But the result itself was resounding, 63 to 37%. That's resounding. The vast majority of elections and official polls conducted in this nation will never get to 63%. That's a brilliant result. But since the merger, our community have seen no savings. We have seen no improved services. Council's budget and finances have been continually stressed. Council constantly asks for more money from state government. We don't get any response. But let's not forget, state government abandoned its merger policy only 9 months after it initiated it. State government walked away from the amalgamation policy. But after 5.5 years of experiencing the merger, our people went to the poll. They experienced an administrator, they experienced an elected council as part of the merger, and they have decisively voted that they don't want any more of it. In fact, I've noted that several councillors themselves have said that the merged council was the worst period of their elected life. Very interesting comment coming from your councillor. In fact, the merger has delivered one very interesting result that we all thought it would. It has quickly delivered what many of us knew what was going to happen. We now have one major political party controlling council with 38% of the primary vote. I also note that there are no Labor councillors speaking here tonight, and I don't believe that any of their names have been mentioned. That's very, very interesting. Tonight's meeting was set up out of frustration by a community group, not council, in an attempt to try and find out what is going on with the demerger. Our residents and most of our councillors don't know what's happening. After 4 months, there have been no regular updates, no opportunities for anyone to contribute or participate. And in fact, as Councillor Langford said, as Justine said in the first 2 meetings of council, very basic motions that would have contributed to the demerger process have been absolutely voted down. The GM and the Mayor have met twice with the Minister. We heard nothing tonight about those meetings. Councillors were not involved in these meetings, just the GM and the Mayor. We also heard that a staff survey was commissioned soon after the demerger poll was approved. We might ask why this was done. The whole point of the poll was to finally give you a voice and not have it diminished by council or state government as it has been over and over again. The staff survey found that 70% of the organisation don't want to demerge. It is important to point out, though, that a significant proportion of those staff do not live in our municipality, and those staff who do were given a vote, just like you and me. If ever there were data which demonstrates a clear disconnect between an organisation and its customers, this is it. No wonder the community want to demerge. In fact, some people are asking me, how can a GM lead a strong and positive demerger case for the Inner West community when he leads an organisation who are in conflict with the community vote? I think it would be an impossible thing to do. As a senior data analyst and statistician for 40 years, I can tell you right now, council has no data which accurately advised you on the merger, nor can it do so for a demerger. And we heard earlier on that it is very, very difficult for consultants to conduct this sort of exercise. I spent 40 years in the industry. I know of no one. But we do know that a disproportionate number of merged councils are lifting their rates by record levels during a cost of living crisis. Canterbury Bankstown, 36%, Georges River, 33%, Central Coast, 15.5% yearly for the next 7 years. Snowy Valley Council, 36%. Cootamundra Gundagai, 54% over the next 2 years. And I don't even think these are very rich areas at all. Our community must have full confidence that council is proceeding with its wishes. I don't think that's the case at the moment. It is not difficult to prepare a strong and positive case for a demerger. That's the task that the poll has set, and this is what our community expects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Our next speaker is Brian Halstead. Brian is here from the Save Our Council campaign group, and he's also a member of the Demerger New South Wales Alliance. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Pip. Delighted to be here. I've written on the failure of amalgamations and the need for amalgamations over the last 8 years. I've been on the audit committee of a council and I'm a CPA. You've heard from Joseph about the failures of amalgamations and the demerger possibilities. And I think it's important to emphasise the way people felt with loss of representations, feelings of loss of connection and responsiveness of an amalgamated council. It's not all about the figures. The community voted to get the local back in local government, even in the face of a document saying there would be higher rates. I can just emphasise that again. They voted to put the local back in local government. The history of demergers in New South Wales, you have to go to the Boundaries Commission, make a proposal and go to the Boundaries Commission. But I'd like to let you know that you're not alone in seeking to demerge. Demerge New South Wales is supporting communities across New South Wales: Tumbarumba, Central Coast, Bombala, Hilltops, Pittwater, Canterbury, Bankstown, Mid Coast, Gyra, all want to demerge, to have poles to demerge. And the Gundagai proposal is now being examined by the Boundaries Commission with public hearings at the end of April, where the community can make submissions. The coalition ministers for local government seem unwilling to respect the wishes of the residents. And a first-class proposal is required from the Inner West. The proposal is coming from the Inner West, and we've heard about it from the General Manager. What you are having is a proposal from the council being completed and then presented before community engagement. It's interesting that under the legislation, as well as looking at the financials, the Boundaries Commission has to look about the community's interest and geographic cohesion of the areas. I've heard comments that a smaller council will have councillors who actually know all the areas about which they are talking. I've not heard anything for the General Manager about talking to the community about the community of interest when they demerge the council. The Commission may look at the desirable and appropriate relationship between the elected representatives and the ratepayers and residents. The number of representatives needs community input. Last time, Morrison Lowe just said they'd go back to the 12 councillors they had before. Does the community want that, or does it want to go for 9 councillors? And there are these things where you need community input before the plan is prepared. So there needs to be community consultation. The way that Morrison Lowe did the old report, and it appears the way they're doing the new report, is to go back to 2014-15 and build up from there. I suggest it might be a better way to start where we are today in 21-22 and look forward about how we can set up 3 councils by splitting those councils. The community needs to be consulted on whether they are prepared to share services, facilities like having 1 finance department, 1 library organisation, 1 domestic waste contractor, managed by 1 but servicing 3 councils. Is there a need to go back to everything that existed in 2014 and 15? So there is some input required before the proposal is coming to the councillors and then out on community engagement. At that stage, there are some agreed positions. So it's difficult to see how these items are being addressed without involving the community. Later, obviously, the community can make submissions in community engagement and make submissions to the Boundaries Commission. But at that stage, it is often too late to get changes. So what I'm suggesting is where to from now. I suggest that if people who want to work and help to make submissions, look at proposals, look at things they want in their new councils, contact the residents for deamalgamation, and then can work to try to improve the proposals that are coming forward, because it's vital that you get a first-class proposal to demerge. It's important that the community have a chance to say what sort of proposals, what sort of councils they are going to have in the future, because clearly 62.5% of the community want to put the local back into local government, and that's a very important issue. It's not all about costs, and it's not all about the level of those. It's about getting the services, getting the control over those services, getting the control over rates back in the local communities. So I'm suggesting that people join with the residents for deamalgamation and get some proposals up to the council to hopefully get them to change and get a better proposal, a suitable proposal to get the minister to agree to demerge.
Thank you very much, Brian. Our last speaker for tonight, before we open up for questions, and there have been a few, is Rochelle Porteous. Rochelle was long-term, has been a councillor and a mayor in Leichhardt, and a councillor and a mayor in the Inner West Council. So a lot of experience there. It's over to you now, Rochelle.
Thanks, Pip. I'm also founding member of Save Our Councils Coalition with Brian. Look, I would like to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal and the Wongal people, and to say this land is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. Nothing about us without us. That's something that we say in the disability advocacy space where I work, but I think it actually applies really well when we're talking about our local councils and our local communities and what our expectations are. Nothing about us without us. The forced amalgamation of our 3 councils was a shameful backroom political deal. This forcibly amalgamated council was not established to save money or to streamline services. Let's be honest, it was established expressly to silence dissent, to shut down local democracy and concentrate political power with one political party. The community pushed back. We got our de-amalgamation poll and we won an outstanding victory with 63% of the vote. However, we're here in 2022 and the relentless trashing of our local democracy has actually picked up speed. And the new council with its Labor majority is doing this. The motions are being shoved through council meetings with almost no debate. There's no genuine community committees that are left on council with genuine decision-making powers. There are no genuine precinct committees for residents. The council meetings that were twice a month are now once a month. And there's almost no consultation happening. We're seeing consultation reduced to almost tick the box exercises. So of course we want our 3 councils back. We want genuine representation. We want our council chambers to again resonate as being places of local democracy, where councils are able to properly debate issues, represent their constituents. We want our councils back to representing their local community and enabling community debate, enabling community decision-making and empowering local democracy. Our councils belong to everyone, not just a few ambitious politicians. Nothing about us without us. The council is preparing a business case. The community, we're told, is going to be consulted once that business case is written. But what kind of consultation is that? Consultation should be happening before, during, and after. We want to be asked, as Brian has said, we want to be asked what is going to be in this proposal to de-amalgamate it. What's important to us? What are the issues that drive us to want the de-amalgamation? For some of us, it's going to be the poor financial performance of the amalgamated council. It's going to be the fact that we had 3 high functioning and financially sound councils before amalgamation, and now we've got basically a financial basket case. For others, however, it's going to be the lowering of the service standards. It's going to be the loss of local accountability. It's going to be the fact that many of us feel like we're being treated like a number and not a person, or it's going to be the terrible blowouts on the time needed for development application or renewal of licenses. Then others are going to say it's the issue of the loss of local events, or that councils constantly charging more and doing less, that the rates have gone up, not just gone up, they've soared, that harmonisation, which is a horrid word, means increased rates, fees, charges and licence, and winners and losers, but mainly losers. For others like me, the amalgamation has trashed a very proud history of local democracy in Leichhardt, Marrickville and Ashfield councils. It's closed down all community committees. It's silenced valuable community voices. And now we see very little public participation in council meetings, and the respect for council that council had for its residents and that the residents had for its council and its staff and its councillors is at a very low ebb. Nothing about us without us. That's what we want to see with this, yes, de-amalgamation proposal, but we're not seeing it. The demerger proposal needs to have consultation before, during and after. Community has to be involved at every stage. It needs to be front and centre. And I think it's important that we communicate this very clearly to both the General Manager and to all of the councillors, This is not the expectation of the community. This is not delivering for the community. And, you know, council's not a commodity. Council's not a financial statement. Council is living and breathing. It's a holistic consideration of the many ways that council impacts on all of us every day, which is what the proposal should be about. It's clear that the Inner West Council, with its Labor majority, will seek to do a swift business case, and that's been outlined by the General Manager tonight. And no fault to the General Manager. The General Manager is doing the job that he's required to do, but I'd say considerable fault to the majority Labor, who are not delivering in terms of this deamalgamation process. It's really quite absurd that we're having a business case developed with zero consultation before and during the process, and the very swift way that that's actually going to be rolled out. So what we're looking for is community submissions for the demerger, so that we can bring the community voice into this process. We're asking everybody to sign up to the Residents for Deamalgamation campaign. And I think you've seen a couple of notes of that in the chat tonight. And we're wanting to see everybody individually taking on the responsibility of making sure that we do get this demerger happening and we do get the community voice in there. So I'd encourage everybody to get involved, sign up to the campaign. And remember, we have to make this process something that it's going to happen. Nothing will happen without us. We have to make sure that that is the way that we approach this. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Rochelle. Right, now we're into the question time. I'm aware that it's tricky, and I'm also aware that this is a very confined sort of space for democracy. So please bear with us. I think we need way more of these meetings, clearly, and we probably will need more face-to-face meetings. I think that's been stressed enough. But I'm just going to go down through the chat box and ask some of the questions. Some of them, obviously, some people are asking the same sort of questions. And I will try and identify perhaps one of the panellists to answer. I would also like a little bit of time at the very end to give the panellists like a 2-minute right of reply. So bear that in mind. So the first question from Colin Hesse was, given the concerns raised by Professor Drew about the consultants, how can council use a consultant that has opposed forced amalgamation when commissioned by Marrickville Council, that didn't want to amalgamate, and then opposed de-amalgamation when it was clear the Labor mayor didn't want to de-amalgamate? Surely this looks like council is simply paying for the opinion they want to hear. I might throw that to you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Pip. Yeah, thanks for the question. No, not at all. To be honest, what the professor was talking about before is if you go to the big end of town and get someone in to do this type of work, they don't really understand local government. Now, Morrison Lowe was aware of that, got a lot of consultants that have worked in, a lot of consultants within their firm that have worked in local government. The person that's worked on the works in 2000 last year and this year is a former director within local government. He's got a finance background and he's talking to the key people within our organisation to get the right information. So I would argue that we haven't gone to the big end of town in terms of the consultancy. We've got someone who actually knows local government really, really well and does work across the industry and is able to benchmark within local government areas. I assume you can hear me, Pip? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and you can benchmark across there. So that to me is good. Their reputation and working key with council staff as we present and as they put it together and we present it back to council for their consideration.
All right, thank you. The next question was from Bridget. Can we see the results of the financial modelling? I guess that's she's referring to the future modelling that you.
Yeah, I'm going to endeavour to make the case that comes back to council for their consideration and consideration on the amount of engagement that goes on. We'll be able to make that available. I hear what the councillors and the community are saying about, oh, let's get involved, and what Brian said early on in the discussion. But I want you to have a framework and information to have a look at. So that's the objective and the reason we've gone through the approach. You know, quite often I'm happy to agree to disagree with members of the community, but at least you'll have something tangible. We'll try and make the document as transparent as we possibly can. So you can clearly see where the assumptions lie, what the assumptions are, what we've got in it, and the bits that need to be added in. When we bring it back, it won't have all of the bits that need to be in the submission that goes in. There's a whole heap of bit about the benefit, and there'll be engagement that will be happening associated with that. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Okay, the next one is from Christina Valentine. What was the procurement process for the Morrison Low report? And its
because it was a procurement. Yeah, thanks. It was a procurement exemption that we engaged in because of their speciality. There's not a lot of local government or consultants. You can go out, as I said, go to the big end of town and go out and try and grab some people, but they don't necessarily have that experience. So because of the work that they've done and their knowledge of our organisation, all the other previous councils, we engaged them after what we went through a process and got a quote that seemed reasonable based on the work that they were doing.
Sorry, Marganita's asking, what were the assumptions in the business case? What are the assumptions in the business case, and how will this report differ from the last report Morrison Low did?
I suppose what will differ, I can't rattle the assumptions off on the top of my head, but I'll give an undertaking that when something's presented back, that the community, it's easy to understand what those assumptions were. I think last time, many of the people that read the work that they did could understand what those assumptions were. One thing that this will differ, it'll be in accordance with those guidelines, those parts that I put up before, the parts with the business case in accordance with the New South Wales government guidelines. But it'll also have, last time, you might remember, the original was a very short time frame. The election was originally going to be September. The council resolved in May, and they wanted a case back. So they did one scenario, which was the same service level. So this will come back. There'll be service levels for the Inner West if we just gave them back to the smaller councils as after demerge. We'll also go back and try and wind it back to the service levels that the former councils had before the merge. So we'll do that. So that will be the difference, and we'll try and make sure that you can clearly understand it, because it is a big document. So we endeavoured to get them to do an executive summary last time. So we'll try and get and flesh out those issues. But we'll have the opportunity to get feedback from the community and from our councillors as we try and share that, and the Audit and Risk Committee if things aren't clear when we bring it back for discussion.
Thank you. The next question from Merrin is, we've been advised to employ bona fide experts to assess the demerger. Consultants tend to find in favour of whoever's paying them. This council is against the demerger. How can we feel confident in the quality of their findings?
Look, at the end of the day, they'll work through, you'll see what the assumptions are. They'll work the cost out. They're not going to fudge what things, the difference comes in the assumptions. What happens at the end of it. So we'll make those transparent. You've got to have industry experts. They're pulling all the things, service levels, wages, number of people to deliver an outcome for council, trying to benchmark it. There's an expertise required in that. And we think we've got the right people to do that expertise. You'll pull out and then you'll get a number, and you'll get an understanding of the service levels that are associated with how much it costs to run the demerged councils versus a merged council. And then you'll have the opportunity to have a conversation about that.
Okay, Justine's asking, will the community be presented with different options as to how the council can demerge and cost analysis of each option? Will the community have the opportunity to vote on each option and provide feedback?
Well, certainly we want to through the engagement process. So as I touched on, there'll be one of the service levels at the moment and one of another set of service levels, and then we'll have to articulate what they'll be in numbers, and we'll articulate that in a way that makes sense to the community, and then we want to put out and give the community an opportunity to provide some feedback on that. So yes.
They're coming in thick and fast. Why isn't this information transparent before we get the final report? From Charlie.
Well, it's transparent. There's work that the consultant's doing. As soon I'm getting a lot of feedback on what's happening. I've engaged someone and got them on the job to do it. and I'm giving it to you as quick. We're not sitting on it. It is coming to council as quick as I can for then you to have a look at. And I'm sure, I know at the Inner West Community Vet, you'll let me know what you think of it, and we'll get up there, and then there'll be opportunity to talk about it. I've put what I think is, you know, the best case scenario for a time frame. I don't want you to have to wait anymore. As soon as I've got something, we'll hit council in June. It'll become public. You can talk about it. It can be then in the public forum, and then we can get feedback and go forward. And if that all goes well and everyone's happy with that, as I said, we'll bring it back to August, and then it'll travel on. But let's get it to council, get the councillors to talk about it, have something meaningful in front of everyone to provide that information back to you.
I guess if I can jump in here, I think the residents are actually, as you said yourself, very engaged residents in the Inner West. If there's going to be a demerger, you would have to say, apart from rural areas, this would be the area that would be able to prosecute a successful campaign. And we know that New South Wales government is not keen to do this. So that's why we are so startled that we've been kept at arm's length. So I guess these questions really relate to that feeling that we've got one chance at doing this here. And you've got a very, very engaged community to help out. So I guess I'm getting the sense that more than myself feels that the cart's being put before the horses, that the horses need to have more of a say in what is going to be presented to the, even to councillors, and then obviously further on to state government. Yeah, sorry. I guess that was a comment rather than a question.
Yeah, no worries. From my point of view, we're just trying to get something together that's tangible, that answers lots of the questions, that's transparent and gives you the opportunity and the councillors to consider it and the community the opportunity to do that. I appreciate your feedback, chosen the path. I think if we can get something together to start the conversation and see where we go from there.
There is a specific question. What about council using UTS local government unit, including Professor Joseph Drew's expertise?
Yeah, well, we're doing the modelling. That's a matter. We've decided to go down this path. If council is of a mind to do something different, well, the opportunity will present itself when the report I've got comes back to council. Or report Morrison Lowe's doing, we'll present that back to council. But we're doing the work that we're doing now because they had the best experience associated with Inner West.
Another question, what ways can council keep the community more informed? There's nothing on the website, etc. How can we be more actively engaged?
Yeah, well, once this is an evolving feast. As soon as I've got information, I've shared it with the councillors when something's happened. We're only just bedded down the time frame recently with this. We informed the community about the poll itself through a newsletter that went to everything. That was the poll result. At the right time, but personally, I think the right time would be once the report comes back to council, will certainly inform everyone. That will be June. I think that to provide that, it's a matter for council. If there was more information I can provide, all I can say is I've got a consultant on board. They're doing the work, and it's coming back to council in June.
Next question is, how about a review of the business case by a third party before submitting to the minister?
Well, they're all matters for consideration for council. I looked at it and thought, okay, I thought there'd be questions like this. So I'm taking our audit and risk committee. So expert two councillors, independent chair works across a number of other councils, two other community representatives that have been on the audit and risk for some period of time. So we want to get the report to them, to get them to have a look at that, the audit and risk consider that. We'd have the outcome of that feedback from the audit and risk committee before it comes to the first meeting in June, the first time it comes to council in June, and then council can consider that feedback
Okay, another one from Rochelle. Why weren't councillors and the community consulted on how they wanted to proceed with the demerge proposal before consultants were engaged?
Yeah.
I suppose we had to bring a business case back to council. There's always going to be an element. My job is to bring back something that develops a business case. So my view is we're going to get the business case done. We'll bring it into the public domain and report it to council, and then it's a matter for the councillors. I'm merely trying to fulfil the will, get a business case done, and then have the conversation. You know, there are ways you could have an earlier conversation about how you're going to go about it, but I'm engaged. I'm employed here at the Inner West Council to engage consultants, deliver services, do things. I'm creating that opportunity and bringing that report back to council for their consideration. And then it's a matter for council and the community to provide feedback.
Gretchen's asking, when the draft without community involvement comes to councillors in June, regardless of voting along party lines, will the community have an opportunity to comment, have input? A sort of like a statement plus question.
Yeah, well, it'll come back, Gretchen. It'll be published a week before. The community have the opportunity to have a look at that before it comes to council, and then we'll have an engagement process to seek feedback far and wide.
There are quite a lot of sort of commenty things in the chat about the fact that Labor councillors don't seem very keen. Clearly, the Mayor has said that he will respect the wishes of the residents, but we can see from the council meeting so far that they haven't supported any of this transparency that Greens and independent councillors have been pushing for. So we do wonder, well, we're getting the very clear picture from Labor councillors that they want this to be done and dusted, present the case to the New South Wales government, which will go to the Boundaries Commission. The Boundaries Commission will say, no, this doesn't work for us. New South Wales government will say, oh, it doesn't work for us. And then they will have fulfilled their duty and Bob's your uncle. That's it. This is what we're worried about.
Well, all I can say is I think the first thing the Mayor did at the beginning of the year was write off to the Minister, make her aware of the poll, request a meeting. The Minister fit us in. We had new Minister and new staff, fit us in around all of the flood commitment through a quick Teams meeting the other week. As soon as we did that, the Mayor wrote off. I advised all the councillors this to the Minister, told them about the resolution of council at February, which talks about we're commencing the business case. We told them that there was an overwhelming majority vote of the Inner West community, expressed the concerns of the staff of the consultant, Inner West community to merge and involve the community in the preparation of the business case. So the Mayor also sought clarification in a letter which was circulated to all of the councillors. It said, once council submits a business case, how long will it take for the New South Wales government to make a decision? If the Boundaries Commission recommends to demerge, and this is improved, the Mayor sought written confirmation the full cost of the demerger be met by the New South Wales government with no cost to be borne by Inner West ratepayers. It's important to note that in earlier representations to previous local government minister were unable to secure such a commitment. And if the Inner West Council is demerged, we seek a written commitment that elected representatives be left in place so they can oversee the transition process and that no administrator be appointed. Finally, we did ask for the Minister and the Executive Director of the Office of Local Government come and meet with all Inner West councillors. So I'm very hopeful. I've had some positive feedback from the Office of Local Government that they will come and meet all councillors. So between now and June, I will be able to have the Office of Local Government at a council workshop, and all councillors can speak to the Office of Local Government about that. So I'll leave it up for the other people in the room to talk about the politics of that, but all I can say is we've spoken to the OLG a couple of times, we've shared it, I've spoken to them once, and he's written to them twice. shared that information with the councillors, and I'm trying to crack on and get something back into the public domain as quick as we possibly can.
Thanks, Peter. I think I'll speak for all the residents on this forum too. We wouldn't mind being in on that meeting too.
Look, I suppose
maybe there could be 2 meetings, but that's something I think we need to put on the record too. But the last question, let's say here, and then we can go to wrap final comments, is can council put some information on the Inner West Council website about the process and the business case?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to have a look at how we can communicate that. As I said, this is happening. We've just put it together with the time frame. I've shared it tonight of what we're doing. I want to share information as it comes and what we have, and we'll make some information available as soon as it's practical. Cool.
All right. There are a few other questions that are a bit more oriented to people that aren't here. One to Mayor Burns, so I think that's a bit hard for somebody else to answer. What I'd like to do now with the remaining time, and we want to stick to more or less time because I know everybody's tired, is to allow the panellists to do a final wrap up, literally 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you to stick to. Perhaps we'll give Peter a bit of a break from speaking and have him come in the middle, let's say. Perhaps, well, Joseph has gone, but perhaps we could hear from Justine, followed by John, followed by Peter, followed by Brian, followed by Rochelle. How about that?
Thank you, Pip. And yeah, thank you everyone for all of the questions and comments. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and obviously there's a lot of concern and a lot of frustration, and I guess it's good to have a little bit more information from Peter tonight around the business case, but I feel it would have been lovely if we could have had more information prior to this meeting, and I wonder if we hadn't had the meeting, when would we be finding out this information. I encourage anyone to approach me with any ideas that you might have about how you'd like to engage, and as your representative, how you would like me to represent you in regard to this matter at council. I think I also encourage you to approach the Labor councillors as well and talk to them about any concerns that you have. I think it's really important, given that I don't think there are any on this call, that they hear the voice of the community, even though they may not support the demerger as such. It's really important that they do listen to what you have to say. And that's why I'm really keen to have more opportunities for community consultation sooner rather than later. I agree that we really need to engage with residents as soon as possible. Yeah, I think that's probably it. I just really appreciate having heard from everyone this evening, and I really thank you all for your time, and I thank the group for setting up this meeting, and look forward to others.
Thanks very much, Justine. Can't remember the order we were going to go, but how about I kick it to you, Brian?
Yeah.
Do you want to
yes,
couple of concluding remarks?
Yeah, look, I'd love to. It's very vital that the community gets some input into that. I'd be interested to see why the consultants can't put their methodology out for consultation, why we have to wait till we get a final report. When you get a final report, the consultants will be defending the report. Why not put the assumptions or the key methodology out for discussion? Who in the council is looking at this methodology? Is it you, or is it the Audit and Risk Committee? Because the Audit and Risk Committee appear to be again getting the report in its final form. I would have thought that if the Audit and Risk Committee were putting input in at the methodology stage, and you could look at things like shared services, the base which you're working up from, one council providing service to others, one finance department, a whole lot of alternative approaches, but we don't know that because we don't know what the methodology is. Surely the consultants should be willing to put their methodology out for consultation and comment, both from the Audit and Risk Committee and from the community before you get to the final reporting stage. So that's my comment. We need the community to have a say. We need the community to have a say on what's going to happen, how they want to structure the governance of the organisation. There's a whole lot of other issues apart from the finances, and these need to be addressed early in the process.
Thank you very much, Brian. John Stamelos, would you like to go next?
Sorry, Pip, yes. Look, we've had a very, very positive response from our residents, very decisive response. And yet in the very first 4 months, our council have not been able to give any assurance to our public that they are going to proceed with great energy, gusto and determination to deliver what the community wants. We have not heard those words from anyone. That is vital, because our residents who voted for a demerger cross all the political spectrum, Labor, Liberal, Greens, Independents, they cross the whole lot. We haven't been assured by our council that they are moving forward with a strong and positive case and an assurance that everything is going to be done to respect the residents' wishes. In fact, what we're hearing tonight is councillors have been left out of this process. The community have been left out to date in the very first 4 months. Consultants have been appointed without anyone knowing. A timeline's been developed and a path being developed. So much so that most councillors would be quite aware, those who've been previous councillors, this timeline has been developed to a stage that the public comes in and councillors when it's too late to turn back and do anything. We've got a lack of political will. Certainly some people are saying on behalf of one party there's a lack of political will to pursue this strongly. We've heard that our organisation, our staff are voting against a demerger. We need a case that's put forward in a very strong and positive way for our community. That's what our community wants. I think a lot of concern has been expressed here tonight. And I noticed that the previous mayor, Councillor Porteous, has even referred to a community submission. Maybe we need to give that some serious thought. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Look, we'll go back to Peter if you want to make another few comments.
Yeah, thanks, Pip. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, a couple of things. Just on Councillor Stamelos said we heard and mentioned earlier, why did we comment on the staff comment on how many people wanted to stay as is and didn't want to demerge? That's because the councillors last year, when they resolved to do this work, resolved to seek part of it. There was a resolution to seek feedback from the staff. So the best way to do it was a staff survey to do that. So that's why that information came back to it was there. So it wasn't a matter of council trying to drum up or do anything. We've just said we had to ask the staff as part of that. So we, in terms of the feedback I've had in terms of involvement of the community, it'll be a draft report when it comes back in June. I'm getting it in a timely manner that then enables the community then to provide feedback. So in the terms of it, within pretty much 6 months of the election, and the reality is the first 2 months since the election, there's really been December and January. So really within 4 months of the new council getting in and getting their feet under the desk, you'll have a business case that you can have a look at and really analyse and get feedback on, and there'll be something tangible. And then we can talk about the next steps, and that can be a matter for council.
Thanks, Peter. Rochelle, can you give us some concluding remarks?
Look, I think it's pretty obvious that this has not been a transparent process up until now. It's really disappointing just how we've been locked out of this process, how the councillors have been locked out of this process. Things have proceeded with absolutely zero consultation with the community and with councillors, apart from probably Labor councillors. I want to, though, thank the General Manager very sincerely for coming to the meeting tonight. I really appreciate, and I know everybody really appreciates your transparency in sharing with us the information that you do have. I also want to put to you some proposals, because I think it's pretty clear from the conversations tonight that this is not acceptable to the community, the process that's currently being undertaken. And there is deep concern that there has been no consultation at all in the development of this business case. And there's no intention at this point in time to have any consultation at all with the community on it until it is completed, done and dusted. It's just not acceptable. So I'm going to ask you to please stop the clock now. Stop the clock now, set up a demerger community and council task force to oversee the demerger process. Go out as part of that process, go out and consult now about what people want to see in that proposal for the demerger. Consult now, consult during the process, and consult after the process. Let's not make this another tick the box, quick, get it out, get it over with, out the door. Let's actually make, this is something that's genuinely incredibly important, not just to each of us individually in terms of the way councils impact every day on our lives, but also in terms of our own sense of place and self, and we're planning today for ourselves and tomorrow for those that come afterwards. And it shouldn't be something that's pushed through quickly with zero transparency to try and just get it out the door as quickly as we can. And I know that there's political expediency to do that. I've been on council long enough to know exactly what happens in the front and the back of council, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be better. So I'm saying stop the clock, please. A request from tonight, stop the clock. Let's set up a task force on the demerger process, which is composed of council and community. Let's do the consultation. Let's get it right so that we all feel that we're part of that process. And then we can also feel that we're part of the outcome. That would be my request tonight. Finally, nothing about us without us, please.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Thank you very much to everyone that has come tonight, but particularly the panellists who have both contributed to this important discussion, I feel, and answered questions. I think we need more of this, not less. I would note that the timeline that Peter has given us, which is really going through an election, a federal election campaign, or crossing over with that, is really not enough time for residents to have input, as Rochelle's just said. I think it's way too rushed and too quick. It's no oversight at all. I think that's been expressed here, but particularly because we're in the midst of a federal election campaign that hasn't officially been called, but we know it has to happen by the end of May. People will be totally distracted with that. So it really isn't a time for engagement there, and I would suggest that Peter goes back to talk to the councillors about this, because this is a recipe for absolutely zero resident engagement, in my opinion. Anyway, finishing on a brighter note, I think we have aired a number of issues here, and I think that the residents for Deamalgamation will be looking to try and have more meetings, hopefully face-to-face meetings where perhaps more information can be discussed as well. I thank you very much for coming out tonight and being part of this, because I know everybody's busy and completely zoomed out of their brains. And this was yet another Zoom meeting. So please stay in touch. I think I want to thank the tech support of Andrew and Peter, who've been putting little suggestions in the chat box to stay in touch. Hopefully you've got them. You'll find us on Facebook if you haven't. So have a good night, everybody.
Andrew,
you.
could you
Thanks,
put up
Pip.
the last slide? Andrew, could you put up that slide again?
The last
Thank
slide.
you. Good
is
night,
Andrew
everyone.
has a last slide.
The slide.
Thanks a lot.
Andrew? The 42. And it's gone. Gone.
Yes, okay, so here it is. If you've got your phone handy, you can QR code yourself in. Otherwise, you can look at the emails, the Facebook group, or the sign up to the Action Network. Thanks once again and have a good night.
Thanks, Pip. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Cheers. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Peter.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Peter, since you are the host now, I think you've got to stop the recording and stop the you're the one that needs to close the meeting.